Hi folks, Dave with DBS Tech Talk. And today we're going to do a comparison between a planar and a dynamic headphone. I know you're not supposed to compare planars and dynamics. Oh man, shame on me. But this has been a very, very highly requested comparison, and it's a very intriguing comparison. So let's get started. First off, we have the MrSpeakers Aeon Flow open, and next off, we're going to have the Focal Elex from Massdrop. The major differences that you're going to notice right off the bat is the Aeon Flow comes in an extremely nice and well crafted box, very small, easy to store, whereas the Focal Elex comes in a massively huge box, and it's not near as easy to store, and it definitely is not something that you want to carry around a lot. You do not get a carrying case at all with the Focals. All you get is 2 sets of wires and a little bag to put your cables in. With the MrSpeakers, you get a nice carrying case. You get a little user guide thing, which actually you do get with the Focals. And then you get a certificate of authenticity, a cleaning cloth, and a couple tuning dampening foams. The cables that come with the Focals, at first I was okay with them. When I first got them, I was like, these aren't too bad. I mean, they're stiff and they're lanky and long, but I like long cables. I don't mind that. But the stiffness and never ever truly straightening out or becoming softer has really become annoying and a nuisance. And so these cables are meh, and actually double meh. The other real frustration is you only get you get a balanced cable, which is nice. But on the single-ended, you only get a big, huge, clunky 1/4 inch. They don't give you an adapter of any kind. And it would have been nice to get an adapter of some sort like you get with the Grottos or something along those lines for the single-ended. Because if you want to go to 3.5 millimeter, you have to use one of those really bad adapters, and it's just a pain. The cable that comes with MrSpeakers is a lot nicer. This is the dumb cable. It's got a few issues with it. It is kind of meh, but it's not double meh like the Focals. And I found a better cable than the Focals, and that's the MrSpeakers cable. I mean, it's not my favorite cable of all, but it's not a terrible cable, and it is definitely nicer than the Focal. Also, it comes with a screw-on 1/4 inch adapter, which is a lot nicer, so you don't have to get one of those clunky adapters or one of those adapters that's just terrible to use this with a 3.5 millimeter. The alternates that you can get is you can get a peri-op cable for the Focals, and it works a lot nicer. And then the one that I got for MrSpeakers for balanced was a Dyson Audio, so that works really well. So I recommend Dyson Audio if you want a balanced cable. Excuse me. Headphone wise, the MrSpeakers Aeon Flow Open is just beautifully crafted. Has a unique design with the half yoke and the nitinol headband, and then the leather headband is just nice and soft and just very flexible. And it has these unique sliders, which just works great. And you can stretch these things and twist them, and they just go right back to their position. And they are uber light and have a unique design like a teardrop or like the ear. The pads are nice and deep and very cushy. One of the nicest stock pads that I've ever had on a headphone. And when you put them on their head, they just sit and you can just be lost into the world. You don't really notice that they're on your head, and they seal really nicely. and they're not going to flop around and move around. Now, occasionally your headband will become a little loose, but there's a screw up there by the leather pad that you can tighten up, and that'll help keep these in place. The Focal, on the other hand, is big and macho and not subtle in the least. When you have these on, people are going to know you have headphones on, and you're going to know you have them on also. They are heavy, but they have a nice all black stealthy look to them. The pads are super comfy, like down pillows. You put them on your head, and you get a little bit of a hot spot up here every now and then the clamp force lets you know that you do have headphones on, and because of the weight, every now and then I can get a little bit of an ache in my neck. But they're not awful, they're not uncomfortable, they're just a lot heavier than the Aeons, and there you go. Just which way do you prefer? Do you like your headphones to be big and masculine, or do you like them to be pretty and light? And I prefer them like the Aeon. Sound wise, now this review is done with the 1-notch tuning filter, because that is the stock way that the MrSpeakers comes. So all thoughts and comparisons are with the 1-notch tuning filter in. I will make a note about the other two as we go along. And also any comparisons made in this review are between these two headphones and these two headphones alone. It is not of a comparison between all other headphones. It's just between these two. And all thoughts are my own. Bass-wise, the Aeon Flow has very nice sound in the bass. It's very detailed, very clear, very clean, and has a nice impact to them. They are not bass head headphones. They are not the most thumpy sub bass in the world, but they can get down there and rumble if pushed. I found that if I use a FIO A5 portable amplifier, and I turn on the bass boost on it, it will make these start to rumble on the ears. Literally, you can feel it vibrating on the ear. So they will go down there and do it if you want. I do not recommend it. These have a slight hump in the mid and upper bass that gives it a nice warm texture to it. And they have a very nice, it's a subtle warmth. It's not a super dark headphone, but it has a nice little warmth to the sound that just makes them very smooth in the bass and makes them a very fun sound. Whereas the Elex, they extend well. They have a nice impact. Again, these are not bass head headphones either, but they will rumble when pushed or called upon a little bit more than the MrSpeakers. The clarity and detail is there also, and the only thing different is these are more linear. They do not have that little warmth in them. Mid-wise, the Focal Elex is very smooth, but is slightly recessed from the bass and from the treble. And they can sound a little bit boring in the mids, especially with vocals. But they're not bad in any way. They just sound a little bit less engaging in the mids. Whereas the MrSpeakers on the lower mids, they continue that little warmth hump, and it gives it a little more engaging full-bodiedness to the mids, and they're just very smooth and relaxing. And it is a laid-back type of mid, and sounds very, very smooth and buttery. Has a natural sound to them. The Focals have a natural sound to them, but these have more body and fullness to the mids. The treble on the Aeon Flow is nicely extended, has very good details and clarity, but they are slightly rolled off at the top. They're not veiled or anything of that sort. They're not chopped off too prematurely, but they do not extend as well as the focal. The focal, on the other hand, is a little more aggressive and brighter sound than the MrSpeakers, and they have they extend higher up, but also at the same time they can show a little bit of graininess and a little bit of sharpness to them. Not sibilance, just a little bit of a sharpness and a small edginess to them. They're not as smooth and as buttery as the MrSpeakers. The difference comes into play for the MrSpeakers when you change out the tuning pads. If you go into the black foam tuning pads, those tend to bring the treble out a little bit more, add a little bit more air and crispiness. But at the same time, you can get some sharpness and a little bit too much of an edge, in my opinion, and it will sound a little grainy. If you remove all pads, that just makes that issue even more noticeable. And I really did not care for these without the black pads in or the one notch. If you add the two notch in, that doesn't really affect the treble too much, does warm it up just a little. But what that does is it changes the mids and the bass and makes them a little too warm, in my opinion. All the details and everything still remained. It was just a little bit harder to dig out. So my preference for these is the one notch filter. Soundstage is completely different on both of these. Neither one is going to be soundstage kings as far as wideness. Neither one of them is as wide as an M1060 or a HD 700 or even an HE4XX or the Advanced Alpha. None of those are going to be that. Neither one of these are that wide. But the Elex is wider in sound. And I think some of that is added into the fact that they are a brighter sound. So it just makes them sound more open. The differences in it is going to be the depth and the perceptions of height and width on them. And the Elex has more of the immersive sound. You kind of get the 360-degree sound, and everything's just kind of out there for you to hear. Whereas the MrSpeakers has a more direct approach. If something is close by, it's going to sound close, and if it's farther out, it's just going to sound more distant and further away. It's not going to be as noticeable, but it's going to still be there. It's kind of odd, but in my opinion, that's kind of how our ears hear things. Whereas on the Elex, it seems like everything in the soundstage is at the same level, just farther out and has more air and space in between. I actually prefer the soundstage on the MrSpeakers. Also, the MrSpeakers tends to have a little bit darker of a background than the Elex because of that brighter sound that the Elex has. Sometimes you can catch a little bit more hiss and popping and things like that than you can on the MrSpeakers. Imaging and detail is very good on both. Neither one of them is going to suffer in giving you a detail, and both of them kind of present it in a different way. The Elex is more aggressive and kind of forthright and puts it right out there, whereas the MrSpeakers is a little bit more calming and relaxing in how it presents the detail, and you just kind of get to enjoy it with the rest of the music. It's more of a balanced sound. So which one is for you? Well, if you are looking for a warmer, full-bodied, relaxed, well-balanced sound, the Aeon Flow Open would be the one for you. Whereas if you're looking for a more brighter sound, all the details, and you like to get all the clarity and all the nuances of the song, the Focal Elex. Both of them have about the same amount of detail in the sound. It's just the way that they present it. The Elex is the more aggressive, the more analytical. It's more neutralish on the analytical side, whereas the Aeon Flow is more warm and full-bodied, and it's a neutralish with a warmer tint. So which one are you looking for? Aeon Flow is more fun. Focal Elex is more business. Both are staying in my collection. Both are going to get used on a regular basis. And I enjoy both of them, and I highly recommend both of them. This has been Dave with DBS Tech Talk. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.